Alright, in this video we're going to go over a function in Python called the range function. So the usage of the range function is very simple. It just returns a list of integers. So it's going to give you integers based on the criteria that you give, that you pass into the range function as arguments. Alright, so the syntax, very simple, range, and then in parentheses, there's two different ways we can structure the syntax of the range function. The first one is to give it only a stop character. In other words, we want a list of integers, right? So that list has to have a starting point and a stopping point. The stopping point, if you only give it one argument, that's going to count as the stopping point. So if you say range and then in your range you have 10, it's going to go up to but not including 10, and we'll see an example of that in a second. The other type of syntax that we can use for the range function is to give it three arguments: the start, the stop, and the step. So the start is the first number in your list that the list is going to start at. The stop, again, is the last number, not including that last number. So if you put a stop value of 10, it's going to go up to 9, and again, we'll see that in a sec. And the step, that tells you how much is in between, how much space is in between each of the integers. So if you give it a step of 2, it's going to go up by 2s, 2, 4, 6, 8, etc. If you don't give it a step value, it assumes a step value of 1. In other words, it's going to go up by 1s. So we'll look at an example of all of these in a sec. Just know that using the range function, the first thing, if you're only giving it one character or one argument, it's going to treat that argument as the stop value. If you give it three arguments, it'll treat it as start, stop, and step. Or if you only give it two arguments, then it'll treat it as start and stop with an assumed step of 1. All right, so if we look at a couple of examples here, we could just print out a list that's given by the range function. So if we did print range and then gave it 5, this is going to treat 5 as the stop value because we only gave it one argument, right? So if we have print range 5, the important thing to note with the range function is that it always starts at 0. The index of the first index that the range function is going to do is 0 unless we give it a different start value here. All right, so the range function is always going to start at index 0 unless we're giving it a start value. So if we print range 5 here, if you want me to kind of try and predict the output here, I'll show you what we have here. If we look over here at the list of the output, we have 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So this gives us an item or a list that has items up to but not including 5. So that's very important here. This argument that we give the range function is not included in the list that we end up with. So we go up to this stop value of 5 but not including 5. So we again start at 0 and go up to but not including the stop value. So that gives us 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Note, we didn't put a start value here, so it assumed 0, and we didn't put a step value, so it assumed 1. Right? If we're using only one argument, that counts only as the stop value for the range function. Let's take a look at another example. What if we were to add here a second number? What if we had 2, 5, and now we have two arguments in this range function? Again, that's going to treat that as the start and stop values. So if you want to, again, predict what the output might be for this range function here, we have 2, 3, and 4. So again, we were given a start value here of 2, so we start our list at 2, and we were given a stop value of 5, which means we go up to but not including 5, so we have 2, 3, 4. We didn't include a step value here, so the step is assumed to be 1, and we went up by 1s in our integer list here. So let's say we wanted to try and include a step value here. Let's maybe change our list from going from 2 to 10, and let's give it a step value of 2. So this means that our list is going to start at 2, it's going to end at 10, not including 10, and then it's going to have a step value of 2, meaning we're going to go up by 2s. So this would be a good time to try and practice and make sure you can predict the output here. What we'll end up with here is 2, 4, 6, and 8. So we started at 2 because that was our start value. We went up by 2s because that was our step value, so 2, 4, 6, 8. And then our ending value was 10, but it's not including 10, so we're going to end up stopping well before 10 at 8. Notice we're not going to do 9 here because that's not going up by 2's, and we're not going to do 10 because the end value is not included in the list that your range function is going to output. All right, we can also do some negative values in here, and it will work just the same. If we have -2 to 10, it would go up from -2 all the way to 10, and we can see that here, right? We have -2 and then 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Again, going from -2 to 10, not including 10, but going up by 2's because that's the step value we gave here. If you give a negative step value, let's say we wanted to go from a higher number to a lower number and gave it a negative step value, then it's basically going to go the same process. We're going from 10 down by 2's because it's negative, down all the way to 2, but not including 2. All right, so we can see the output here. We started at 10 because that was our start value, so we have 10. And then the step value is -2, which means instead of going up by 2, we're going down by 2. So we go down by 2, 8, 6, 4, and then our ending value here of 2, again, is not included, so we're going to stop before we get there, right? Because the next number in this sequence of this list would be 2, but because 2 is our stop value, the stop values are never included in the output of the range function. All right, so there's a couple of examples over here if you want to practice and predict the output of each of these range functions. Maybe pause the video and I'll give you the outputs in a sec so you can check your answers. All right, so the outputs of these functions we'll see here. The first one, we have only one argument here, so that's going to be the stop value of the function. So we're going to go from 0 because that's the starting index unless you give the range function something different, all the way up to 7, but not including 7. So we go 0 up by 1's to 6, and then stop before we get to 7. The second one here, the range function, we gave it a start value of 5 and a stop value of 9. No step value, so it's going to keep going up by 1's. So we have 5, 6, 7, 8. Again, we stop before the stop value of 9. And the last example here, we went from 2 to 10 up by 3's. So we start at 2, plus 3 is 5, plus 3 is 8. And again, we can't do 9 because it's not going up by 3's, and 10 is not included, still not going up by 3's, but again, we stop before we get to the stop value, and then our step value here told us to go up by 3's. All right, thanks for watching this video on the range function, and I'll see you in the next one.